Hello, hello. Welcome to Sit and See. I'm Dr. Jared Jones. For those of you who know me, I suppose I don't need to introduce myself, but for anyone who's new, my research specialties as a PhD were ancient systems of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, the cognitive science of meditation, and what else? Philosophy of science. That's right. So when um, I got involved in academics, I was also at the same time involved in full on Buddhist practice. And so I've actually been quite a serious Buddhist practitioner for about 20 years. And overlapping with that, the last 6 years, been a pretty seriously interested in the methods found in Taoism and internal Chinese martial arts. So for those of you who just saw the the premiere of the first podcast episode with Neil Ripsky, you know I'm quite keen about these kinds of practices that have to do with the body and the energy system. Okay, so just for those of you who are new and popping in, maybe this is your first time in this class. So unlike the open Q&As and the other events that I do, Sit and See is all about our actual seated practice. So I try to keep the questions directly related to your personal practices that you're doing today, tomorrow morning, etc. So I try not to take open questions about all sorts of things and theoretical things. Otherwise, there's no time to take questions about people's practice, and or there's no time for practice. So we have to keep it quite focused. So please do keep your questions related to your personal practices. DJ asks, do I think Mahasi method? So DJ, with this session, as I just mentioned, I try to only talk about your personal practices. So unless you're planning on attaining nirvana in one session tonight, then that's thinking too far ahead. That being said, very briefly, I don't know. I don't know enough about the Mahasi method to say where it leads or doesn't lead. So those of you who have been in this class before will be aware. Hold on, I'm going to change my mic over. Let me know if this still sounds okay or if it sounds a little funny now that I've changed over to the lapel mic from the other mic. Yeah, those of you who have been in this class before will know that we start out with Q&A and then we go into our actual personal practices. So in terms of okay, yeah, so DJ, what I mean by that is if you describe what you're doing in your practice, for example, if you're doing breath practice or you're doing body scanning or you're doing awareness of mental formations or awareness of consciousness, I try to answer direct questions about your actual practice, right? Not so much overarching theoretical stuff, but the things you're actually doing on the cushion. So it's much more practical, less theoretical. Yeah. Again, I'm going to have somebody help me with the sound eventually because I either get the gain so much that it's crackling and popping, or I get the, or it sounds like this. You know, it sounds a little bit thin, and I can't quite find the right mix. So I need someone that knows more about sound than I do, and I'd prefer for it to be slightly on the thin side rather than crackling and popping because I find that insufferable. So Adwiana, Adwania, Adwania says, I stopped meditating and now I can go no more sit, close my eyes for even 5 minutes. So you mean that you're unable to do your daily practice, you mean? So for those who are new, please do about your actual daily practices, whatever you're working with at the moment, just put your questions in the chat. And I take questions for usually 15, 20 minutes before we do our actual practice session for the day, just to give people time to get into the room. because we're in a bunch of different time zones and, you know, that sort of thing. Okay, let's. I think I'll just have to switch over to this mic, and we'll see. Maybe later I can go back to the lapel. I hope I can. Otherwise, it'll be hard to do our standing practice today. So let's pretend we're starting over. So, welcome to Sit and See. The way this class works is you ask me the actual practical questions you have about your practice, and I do that for 15 minutes or so before we get going. And then we actually do our practice for the day. And yeah, for those of you who know, the sound will be quite different depending upon which mic I'm using, unfortunately. And there's kind of no way to get around that at the moment. I just have to deal with the fact that it's quite different depending upon what mic I'm happen to be talking into. Okay, so let me see how this goes. Wow, that's really bad. That's like almost nothing. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, well, I guess we're not doing anything with the lapel mics today, unfortunately. Not quite sure why this is so bad you can't even understand what I'm saying, but that seems crazy. All right. So, right. Friends, comrades, put your questions, comments, concerns in the chat, and I will take them as they come in. So when I say questions for this class, try not to ask overarching theoretical questions about the end stages of your practice, which is not where any of us are. Ask me questions about the day-to-day stuff you're struggling with in your practice, like, you know, what's going wrong with my body scanning, what's going wrong with breath practice, what's going wrong with trying to meditate on consciousness, this sort of thing. Those are the kinds of questions I try to take in the chat. So DJ, your question didn't get lost. I mentioned already that I don't have an opinion on Mahasi practice and whether or not that leads to nirvana. And also, that's a theoretical question, not a practical question. So if you have questions about your practice, your actual daily practice, right? And I'm happy to answer those. That's why we're here. So you guys tell me. You tell me what questions you have. I'll do my best to answer them while we're waiting for other people to join before we do our actual practice for the day. So, what kind of questions do you have? So, right. What do I do with this? So, does wisdom require thinking? Yeah, it does require thinking. Wisdom comes from, sorry, give me 1 second. Hopefully that's still okay. Um, Wisdom comes from discernment. Discernment is a mental factor that has to do with thinking things through and being aware of the fine differences between things. So if you can't become aware of the fine differences between things, you can't develop wisdom, i.e., insight into how things exist. So in the beginning, it's going to require thinking things through. And the beginning is actually not just the beginning. According to the Mahayana way of breaking this down in terms of mind and mental factors, you need to spend huge amounts of time working with conceptual thought. You're going to be working with conceptual thought way, 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 way down the bodhisattva path. So all the way through parts of the path of preparation and the path of meditation on the Mahayana way of thinking about all this, you're going to be using conceptual thought. So there's nothing wrong with conceptual thought. You need it to make your way down the path and to develop insight into emptiness and selflessness and impermanence. Okay. Um, Apa Japa. A Japa Japa. I'm not sure what a Japa Japa meditation is. Okay, so we've actually got these are Avidya that Awanya rather, sorry. That's a very good question. So the first problem that you have in meditation is that your conceptual mind, which is normally out of control, is trying to pull your attention off of whatever activity you've placed the mind on. And you need a really powerful, strong technique to rip your mind out of distractions, which are quite powerful, and place your attention where you wanted it to be. So the technique that I teach for this, in the way of dividing things up, I call it Foundation 1. It's the first skill you need if you want to be successful in meditation, is being able to place your mind where you want, when you want, and hold it there for some period of time, right? And you need to be able to do that first before conceptual thoughts are going to become less. And then once you can do that, there are techniques that are really effective at making conceptual thoughts become less and more of your mind stay on the activities that you want your mind to stay on. So in particular, body scanning meditation is very, very good for this. And so the first two techniques that I teach are placing the mind intensively on the breath, very intensively with great force, because that's how you pull your attention out of ordinary stuff and onto the object for the first time. And then once you can do that, once you can pool your awareness, you can pull it in and pool it in one place. Then you can take that ability and apply it to body scanning the body, which will make the whole nervous system much more calm, make the whole body much more comfortable, etc. And then you're going to be able to sit for longer periods of time and do more practice. And since the body's more comfortable, the body will be less distracting. Since the body's less distracting and the mind is more calm, you can now do other types of meditation that are even more effective at reducing conceptual thought and addressing the next problem, which is that your mind will become sleepy. Your mind will become dull. So the way that I've laid out the techniques that I teach for the sit and see class is based upon these concept or based upon this pedagogy, based upon this way of laying it out. Okay, so okay, yeah, mantra practice can be good. Um, both the silent versions and the ones with sound, those can both be good. Um, from my experience, for mantra to be really effective, you need to do a huge amount of it. You have to be like if you want it to be really transforming your mind, you need to be doing a lot of it, like 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day, for those practices to have a really big effect. So it is a very profound practice. Mantra is very profound stuff, but for it to really transform your being requires you to put in a lot of work. And we don't, as lay people living in the real world, we don't have that much time. So for developing the actual capabilities of meditation, mantra, I think, is not the best approach unless you're in retreat. A much better approach is to do something like placing the mind intensively on the breath so that you build up the first two cognitive skills you need for meditation, and then doing body scanning so that the mind becomes extremely calm and the body becomes really comfortable. And then turning your mind over to types of meditation that you can take off the cushion and into real life because you need to transform more of your life into practice. If you want to make progress, you just have to bring more and more of your activities into actual practice. So, um, that's why I put the practices that I teach in the order that I teach them. So, Jonathan asks, how do we deal with anger? No, mantra is very effective. It's a very effective approach if you have a lot of time. If you're in retreat, mantras are really interesting. Each one of them has its own flavor and affects you differently. Mantras are very, very interesting. But again, from my experience, you just need a lot of time to build up the sort of flavor of each mantra in your system. And you have to do a lot of it to build those flavors up. And very powerful stuff. But you need a lot of time and a lot of recitations to do it. So I think, like I said, there are techniques that don't require you to do that kind of repetitive activity that takes all of your attention away from the world to build up the cognitive skills related to meditation. And so these are the ones that I teach, the ones that where you don't have to be sort of stuck with one thing. Okay, so how do we deal with anger? So anger and dealing with anger falls under what I call Foundation 5, rumination meditation. So when you're trying to deal with what's on the surface of your mind, like anger, attachment, jealousy, arrogance, this sort of thing, the same process you use to generate anger and make it totally spontaneous, like you said, the anger just comes up with no effort. And when it comes up with great force. But it wasn't always like that. If you think about something that in politics, for example, that you're really passionate about, that makes you really angry every time you think about it, if you go back in your memory, you can find a time when you didn't care about that issue at all. So you spent time thinking through that political issue, looking at evidence, looking at arguments, getting in arguments with people on the internet, watching videos, blah, 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 until until you built up the spontaneous outrage that occurs the moment that you now think about that issue, bang, the anger comes. So this is called rumination, where you think something through and think it through and think it through and observe things and look at examples and blah, 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 until you have an automatic reaction as soon as you think about the issue or as soon as you encounter a relevant situation. So rumination meditation, what I put as the fifth part of the training system that I teach people, is learning how to do that for virtue instead of non-virtue. So one of the things that you can cultivate is, for example, the opposite of anger, which is patience. Or in some cases, the opposite of anger, you need something like loving kindness or compassion, depending on what the situation is. So there are ways. Oh, and also you can just think about the downsides of anger, so that when anger starts to occur, you have really strong hesitation about following it up and chasing it and adding to it and so on and so forth. So there are methods for thinking it through until your attitude and reaction changes. Yeah, which doesn't sound very profound, but when you start to think about it, the idea that you could take every emotional reaction you have to absolutely everything in the world and change it to be something better and more functional, so that when you're not thinking about anything or when you're not trying to do anything, that your natural reactions to everything are virtuous mental conditions, is actually a really profound thing. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I missed your question. So, how important is posture? Adwi, Adwi. Posture is fairly important, but there's a lot made out of posture that doesn't matter really until you get further down the road. There's just a huge amount of postural stuff that's taught right in the beginning that makes very little difference and maybe no difference at the beginning of the process. So the most important bit is that as best you can, you want to have your spine relatively straight. And I say relatively because a lot of times, for example, when people hear tuck your chin, they think that you're going like this. That's not tucking your chin, that's pulling your neck back like a military person, and you'll damage your neck. You'll make it harder to meditate in the long run. So tucking the chin is actually talking about this joint at the top of your skull. And if you watch my neck, see that joint can move independently of the neck. See it? The neck stays where it is and that joint moves. So when you tuck the chin, you're just moving that top joint. You're not pulling the head back or things like this. So there are little details like this where you're just trying to get the spine into its natural curve, that it holds itself up with minimum effort, and it is not artificially straight by making it all tight and weird. It is as straight as it would be, sort of, if someone just kind of could grab you by this part of your head and just lift you up like an anatomical skeleton, where everything just sort of hangs down off of it. So it's not artificially straightened. It's natural and comfortable and straight. And if you have a back problem or something or a neck problem that makes it so that you can't do that, no problem. Just be in the posture you can be in, you know? And then if there's a lot of pain because of your posture, because of having, postural issues or spine problems or neck problems, no problem. Do more body scanning meditation. And the body scanning will make the pain less. And also, if you do little exercises like the ones that I teach sometimes, like these, where you're learning how to loosen up the different parts of the spine and all the little muscles that go along the spine so that you're using basically you can retrain and re-strengthen and re-straighten your spine and your neck to some degree. Whether or not you can make it go back to like perfect is an open question. Maybe, maybe not. But like with the Shaolin Lohan course that I just talked about on the other stream, the Chinese systems for working with your body, it's mostly based upon. Um, I mean, there's a lot of elements, but a huge amount of it is based upon the white tissue, the connective tissue. They're also interested in the muscles and the bones, of course, like everyone else is in terms of health. But the big thing is the health of your connective tissue. So you can reshape through deliberate exercises all of the connective tissue that holds everything in the place that it's supposed to be in the body, and that makes the body way more comfortable to live in. And I've had chronic pain for years, and it comes and goes. Sometimes it's worse than other times, et cetera, et cetera. But training in this stuff has given me so much of my life back, in terms of the Chinese health arts in particular. And I did yoga, I did other things, and nothing is as good as this from what I've tried. I did Ashtanga yoga really hardcore for about just under a year, and it actually hurt me worse than when I started. But this stuff isn't like that. So there are ways there are exercises you can do to lengthen the spine gently and to gain more mobility in the spine and the neck and to make it work properly in all directions and to increase the strength and flexibility of all of the white tissue that's connecting everything. Matter of fact, the standing practice we're going to do today naturally does that. If you do a lot of it, it helps with this. Okay, let's see what else is in the chat. I don't want to go too long because I want to do some actual practice today, my friends, colleagues, comrades on the path. Do I have an email address? Richard, you can reach out to me on Discord if you'd like. I don't know. I haven't seen any of the moderators. Yeah, Ashtanga's hardcore. I don't see any of the moderators here, but um, remind me at the end, and I'll put the Discord link up before I go, as long as you remind me. Okay. So for some of you, there's going to be a lot of weird stuff that I'm telling you to do. And trust me when I say this all comes from classical Buddhist sources, and only a very tiny amount comes from classical Taoist sources that really help, that also aid things, that really helps things. Um, and I have put an extremely huge amount of time into trying to figure out exactly what it is a layperson living in the real world needs to make progress in these techniques. So if you have a little bit of trust, a little bit of, dare I say, faith that if you do the things I'm asking you to do, it will produce the results I'm telling you. I know this because I do them and I got the results, and I also know this because I've been teaching people 4 or 5 years now, and everybody that's trained with me who's put these practices into practice have gotten the results that I say these things produce, right? So it's actually all causality. It's just putting the right causes in place at the right time, putting the right practices in place at the right time to address the problems that you have. My two big shticks, if I may, are one, in the beginning, And for most of us, we're still at the beginning because we've done a lot of practices that haven't built the basic skills of meditation yet, unfortunately, even if we've done a lot of other practices. And that'll be revealed to you when you try to do the first practice. So the first practice is actually getting your mind to go where you told it to go. And more of your mind to go there than any other practice you've probably done, unless you've trained with really good people. Then the second technique is to immediately take that skill off the cushion so that you can begin training how to have a concentrated meditative mind in the midst of real life. Because you don't want to just train in meditation, you want to become meditative. Your whole way of interacting with the world changes because your mind is different. So there are actually techniques to train you to take the skills you gain on the cushion off the cushion and into real life. So today, the reason that the camera's pointed this way at the room is because we're going to do those things. We're going to do some of those practices today. So Adwi, send me a message on Discord or Facebook. And hey, Hans, good to see you. Uh, and we can talk about it. Anything that's sort of personal. I'd like to know what's going on in your life and what you're dealing with personally and so on. Because with that kind of question, I can tell there's stuff going on that requires a more personal touch. And I'm happy to do that. Just reach out to me personally on Facebook or Discord or something, okay? That's the best way. All right, let's get into some practice. So we're going to start with um, we're going to go straight into standing practice. We're going to be taking our practice once again off the cushion right away, and we're going to be training to generate these skills of meditation off the cushion instead of on the cushion. So come to a standing position. So the first thing that's important in terms of posture is look at my feet, right? You want your feet, almost like you're standing on train tracks, to be facing forward. And you want your feet to be either hip distance, which is right here, right? Sort of all the bones lined up straight down from the hips, or shoulder distance, which is, as it sounds, right here below my shoulders. You don't want to be like this. You don't want to be like this, okay? So your feet are pointed forward, and your weight is going to be sort of here. Not on the ball, not here. You're not standing on your toes, but sort of, if this was my foot, it's going to be here, okay? All right. So if your legs get too tired, you can move the weight to here, just the front of the heel. If you're doing okay, keep it here, just behind the ball of the foot. All right? This is important. DJ, don't worry about it. Just do it seated. You can do all the stuff I'm going to describe. You can do seated. So just assume a seated position, and when we start the actual practice, you can do it. You can do it in a seated position. Okay? So next, bend the knees. And you'll see that when I bend my knees, watch my head and my torso. When I bend my knees, see how my whole body ends up going this way? So my whole body ends up over that point on the foot both feet I was just talking about. So you bend the knees to there. Now imagine that there's a really heavy weight pulling straight down from your perineum to between your feet. And you'll feel, if you can really get that feeling that the weight is pulling down like this between the legs, you'll get the feeling that it almost pulls your upper body up. If the lower body is getting pulled down, like you're stretching an accordion or stretching a rubber band, it's almost like the upper body pulls the opposite way. And not because you're doing that on purpose, but because the lower body is falling. And then just imagine there's a string tied to the back third of your skull, and you just lift, or you can think, just tuck the chin slightly. Right? That's it. Now, in terms of the arms, with the arms, you don't want to have limp noodle hands. Have a little bit of life in the hands. Then take your hands and place them on your thighs like this so that you don't end up doing this kind of thing and the body doesn't get all weird and in the wrong place. Now that you've set the posture up, just place the middle finger on one of your thighs. Keep the hands gently open, gently stretched open. And this will sort of anchor your arms so that you don't end up, as you stand here, with a weird upper body situation. Okay? Okay. So now next, we're going to actually start the practice. So if you're seated, you can just follow along. The instructions will be the same. So take your attention as if everything is actually riding on this decision you're about to make. Everything depends upon you being able to do this. This is the most important possible decision. Take every ounce of your being as if your life depends upon it, because the rest of your life does depend upon it, and place it with as much force as you can on the sensations of breathing inside one of your nostrils. You're not imagining those sensations. You're not trying to figure them out. You're not mentally labeling them with words. You're feeling the actual sensations inside your nostril. And then you're going to count every time you get to the out breath from 1 to 7, 7 to 0. You can adjust the body a bit when you get to 0 if you need to. Otherwise, stand completely and entirely still. And pull all of your attention from everywhere else, all of your senses, your entire rest of your body, and cram all of that attention with great force into that little tiny patch of skin inside the nose. Okay? When I say begin, do it right away, 100% effort. Yeah? 3, 2, 1, begin. Now let's start with the feet. We're going to do body scanning meditation. So when you place the mind into a body part, you're not visualizing it, you're not imagining it, you're not trying to figure it out, you're not analyzing it, you're not mentally labeling it with words or concepts. You're becoming aware of the actual physical, tactile sensations that you feel in that body part. Just like you did with the nostril, you're going to place your mind. It doesn't have to be with the same amount of force, but you're still nonetheless going to place your mind in the body part that's being named. So let's begin with the left foot, left ankle, calf, knee, lower thigh, upper thigh, and the hip, right foot, ankle, calf, knee, lower thigh, upper thigh, hip, the front of your pelvis, the back of your pelvis, follow your sacrum, which is the part of your spine that goes through your pelvis. Follow that down to the tailbone. Move forward to the anus, perineum, and the sexual organ. Now slide back up the sacrum to the back of the waist. And the front of the waist. Back of the diaphragm belt. And the front of the diaphragm belt. The back of the chest. And the front of the chest. Place the mind into the top of the left shoulder, the front, side, back, armpit, bicep, elbow, forearm, wrist, palm and back of hand, thumb, pointer, middle, ring, and pinky. Slide up the left arm over to the top of the right shoulder. Front, side, back, armpit, bicep, elbow, forearm, wrist, palm and the back of your hand, thumb, pointer, middle, ring, pinky, and slide up now to the lower third of your neck. Middle third, upper third, the back of your scalp, left side, right side, left ear, right ear, forehead, left eyebrow, right eyebrow, left eye, right eye, nose, left cheek, right cheek, your upper lip, lower lip and chin, your top lip, bottom lip, and the skin inside your mouth. Your teeth, the roof of your mouth, below your tongue, and the tongue. Now start at the tip and slide back along the tongue to the throat. And then from the throat, slide upward through the top of the head and become aware of the top of the head. Now we're going to transition to an exercise that you can fully take off the cushion. This is called the 5 points. It's a precursor to full body meditation. So place your awareness on the top of the head and feel around on the top of the head for a point or an area that's a little more sensitive than the rest of the top of the head. Or it may feel like there's movement or tingling or static electricity or something around that particular area. If you don't feel anything like that, then just place it on the back third of your skull in the middle of the skull. Now from that point, stretch your awareness down without losing the point and add your left hand. So become aware of the left palm, fingertips, nail beds. Stretch the awareness down from the top of the head again. Become aware of the right hand, palm, fingertips, nail beds. Stretch the awareness down again. Become aware of the left foot, heel, ball, toe tips, nail beds. Stretch the awareness down again. Become aware of the right heel, ball, toe tips, nail beds. Now hold your mind on 5 points. Top of the head, both hands, both feet. Without losing those 5 points, we're going to start our walking meditation. Do not shake out your legs. Do not shake out your feet. All of the feeling of fullness or pressure in the legs and feet that's built up, leave it as it is. And when you walk, keep the awareness in top of the head, both hands, both feet. And if you need to walk at this pace, if you need to walk super unnaturally slow, then walk super unnaturally slow. And if you notice that you've lost one of the points or 2 of the points, then stop, reestablish the awareness of the 5 points, and then carry on walking again. And only go as fast as you can legitimately maintain the same degree of concentration that you had when you were standing still. So if you have to stop over and over and over again to get the intensity of the awareness back, that's fine. And if you're in a seated position, then just stay aware of the 5 points in a seated position. And since I've been doing this for a couple of weeks, I'm going to move at a pace that's comfortable for me, but move at whatever pace you need to maintain the awareness of 5 points. Pause for a moment. Become aware of the top of the head, both hands, both feet, and keep going. Okay. You can come back to a seated position. Okay. So, questions? Yeah. Like I said, the standing practice, when you stretch the palms slightly and you let the arms hang down and you stretch the spine slightly and you have the foot on the ground like this, slightly stretched, and you've bent the knee, so now this is slightly stretched and this is slightly stretched on the leg, right? So the thigh is slightly stretched because the weight has shifted forward. The calf is slightly stretched because you've bent the foot slightly. And so you are actually floating, in a sense, on the bouncy connective tissue of the body. So absolutely right. It will feel, if you've been doing standing practice properly, your body will start to feel like it's like a big bag of rubber bands instead of a big box of potatoes. And it should be more comfortable. Your body should be more comfortable because the learning how to stand properly will the joints will start to open up a little bit, your hips will open up a bit, your spine will open up a bit. And if you have trouble sitting, standing can be a wonderful way to do your practice because often it's, your feet and your calves will hurt in the beginning. And it'll feel like you're standing on hot plates, but that's totally normal. As long as there's not a feeling of injury that's building up where some kind of sensation you're getting isn't going away within 15 or 20 minutes, then in that case you need to ease off and not do as much because you don't want to do damage to your feet or your knees or whatever, right? So you need to be aware of when you're. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's. Hold on, let me go in the order of the chat. Hans the Cool liked the PhD response. Oh, glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. If you're in a space where you know where you are, uh, Adwi, if you know where you are and you know you're not going to bump into stuff, you can keep the eyes closed most of the time and just open them when you need to make sure you're not, so that you can keep more of your awareness inside the tactile body. Um, it's not a big issue either way. I mean, obviously, we're trying to build up skills that you can take out into the world, so you're not going to walk with your eyes closed in the real world, right? But if it helps you when you're doing it in a room and you're just walking back and forth to have them closed because you can get more of the bandwidth of your awareness into the things you're focused on, no problem. Yeah, do whatever you want. Um, okay, Earth Wombat, I'll come back to that question about consciousness. Jonathan asks that he furrows his brow when he's doing concentration. I've seen some videos actually of quite accomplished yogis in long-term retreat in caves and stuff, furrowing their brow and pursing their lips sometimes when they're doing concentration training. So at some point that'll drop away on its own. You don't need to spend too much time trying to make it go away. You can go quite far down the road without having to deal with what your face is doing when you're trying to concentrate. Um, so yeah, it's not so important. It'll be more distracting probably to try to stop it from happening because it happens naturally, as opposed to just letting it happen and trying to focus on what you're doing anyway. Okay, so Earth Wombat is talking about Foundation 4, which is Mahamudra practice, is opening up all of the senses and using each of the senses as an object of meditation. So this is a little bit more advanced than what we did today, but if those of you who are new, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to answer this question. When you're meditating on consciousness, it's actually the point of meditating on consciousness, if you're seated, for example, or you're standing still, is to pull it out of the five senses and become aware of just consciousness. If you're trying to maintain that awareness throughout the day, obviously you can't do it like that. You have to keep your senses open or you'll run into people and you won't know what to do in the real world. And so you need to build up the skill of being able to do both. of having the five external senses open and having the awareness on consciousness, and then also pulling the attention away from the five external senses towards consciousness and simply being aware of consciousness. You need to gain skill in doing both things so that you can use them when it's appropriate. Does that make sense? Sweet and Sour. Sweet and Sour says that she felt tingling in the places where she put her mind. That's quite common. I mean, even right now, if you take your awareness and you put as much of it as you can in your fingertip, for example, very, very quickly your fingertip will probably start tingling. So there's something about our nervous system that when you put a huge amount of attention in one area, and I don't know exactly how it works or what it does, but it's quite common for you to feel a lot of sensations in that area that are unusual when you're doing that. So it's normal and it goes away. Um, and not something to spend too much time thinking about. Um, John Jedi says, my walking space is a figure eight. I've noticed that if I walk too much, my hips get out of alignment and I get nerve pinches. Yeah, actually, if you do more of the standing practice and spend more time getting everything sort of lined up where it should be and building up strength in the standing practice so that the body is strong in all of the connections it's supposed to have when you're upright, then those sorts of things should begin to resolve themselves. And then also, because I don't teach that aspect of it at any great depth, this is part of why I mean, I know this stuff because I do it. I train in this stuff for myself. But I don't teach the body side of this at great depth because I don't know. It just requires a lot more knowledge than I have. I have enough to do it for myself, but I don't have enough to diagnose all the problems that other people would have if they were doing it, right? Those are two different sets of knowledge. And so this is why, for example, I'm working with HD. So I'm going to put this in the chat. So I'm working with Neil Ripsky, who's just on my podcast, and he has a full Shaolin system called Lohan Palm, the 18 Lohan Palm, that trains you in all of the stuff to make the body really comfortable for meditation. And it makes your body function better, continue to function quite well as you get older. And I'm 40 now, uh, and I think 40 is where you can start turning the corner and your body can really start getting messed up, and so you can spend your late 40s and 50s and 60s in a lot of pain and things not working as well as they should if you don't do stuff. So the Chinese health arts are designed to make your body really comfortable as you get older. And um, unlike the Hindu yogas, which are now available everywhere, um, the people who train in the Chinese health arts, you have to spend a lot of time. I mean, a huge amount of time going really deep into those systems and learning the hundreds of layers of awareness in the body that you build up through those practices. I'm talking about, for example, this is really interesting, and I wouldn't be mentioning this if I didn't have some experience of it myself. For example, someone mentioned, I think Jonathan mentioned that his body felt like it was filled with rubber bands after doing the standing practice. That's right. One of the layers that makes you up that you never noticed is that you have all of this connective tissue that is like stretchy rubber bands. And you never noticed because your awareness is always in the muscle that's tensing up to move you around. But when you do standing practice, where you're relying on the stretchy tissue to hold you up standing, and then you start moving, you start to notice the stretchy tissue because you've been putting your awareness in it through standing. And there are further practices where you become aware of your internal organs, so you can feel your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your liver, your stomach, your small intestines. You can feel all the stuff inside your body. And likewise, you can feel where the bones are. And my teachers say, I can't do this yet, but they say you can actually get inside the bones also, and you can feel the bone marrow inside the bones. Anyways, so these systems are quite deep and quite rich, and they're very well developed, and they're meant to make your body work extremely well and be really, really comfortable as you get older, and not only make you live longer and more in a better way, but to make the body really comfortable for meditation. So if you're having various kinds of problems with the body, I can't recommend the Chinese health arts enough, and I'm so happy that a proper lineage holder for these techniques is putting together a course to train people in this stuff, because it's basically impossible to find. You know, there's you can the people that are teaching this at a high level are very difficult to find. And Neil knows this stuff and he's teaching it. And I somehow I convinced him to start putting it online. So hopefully within a couple weeks that course will start going live. And yeah, I can tell you from personal experience, I've had chronic pain since I was 16, and nothing has helped like these practices. Nothing has helped like these practices. Okay. I look younger than 40. Yeah, yeah. I inherited my mother's genes, which helps. But again, also the internal Chinese health arts, they're just meant to. Sorry about that. The sound quality be better on this mic anyway. I need to recharge my lapel mics. Right. So obviously, it goes without saying I'm not a medical doctor, but I can tell you from my own experience that these arts make your body much more comfortable, much healthier, and they were designed by people who wanted to basically be have the functionality of a young body into older age. So yeah, it makes you look like you're younger than you are. Okay. Um, yeah, I'm actually 40. I'm turning 41 this year. So a combination of not drinking, I think, is a big issue. I don't drink. I have my mother has very good skin. She looked very young until she was in about 60. So that, I have some genes going on. And then these health arts, they really do, because you're working on all of the different systems of the body to make them function well. It makes you look younger and you feel younger. Everything sort of, like, I know it's a small thing, but for a lot of people, you hit 40, and if I asked you to move your shoulders around in a comfortable way like this, you'd get sort of stuck and it'd be all clunky, right? So the fact that you can just move your shoulders in any direction and they move where you told them to without much resistance is kind of a big deal. And same thing, your neck, to be able to move it wherever you want in whatever direction without much resistance, same thing, you know? And your spine, your hips. That's what these things are designed for. What's really brilliant about something like Lohan and the Chinese health arts is they were designed by people who wanted their physical discipline to fill up to check a whole bunch of boxes at the same time. They wanted it to make them live longer. They wanted it to make them better, make their body more comfortable for meditation. They wanted it to make them stronger in a conventional sense so they could do the stuff they needed to do in the world. And they wanted it, the exercises themselves, They wanted them to basically enhance their meditation training so that you're getting health, strength, flexibility, longevity, and at the same time directly enhancing your ability in meditation. See what I mean? These are the geniuses of working with yourself. I mean, it's just absolutely shocking that we don't talk about this more in Western terms, but I kind of get why we don't, you know? It's more complicated and more difficult than just turning up at a yoga class, but for goodness sake, it does so many more things than just making yourself more flexible, for example, which is part of this, but is nowhere near the end of it. Okay, so can't recommend that highly enough. The other aspect of this that I don't talk much about is the sub-physical substances, the subtle body, and the substances that are there. I've talked to some of you about this. Again, I don't like to talk about it too much because it just sounds weird, you know. But I've done some of these practices, was extremely skeptical when I got started because I've never been a person that believed that crystals could heal you, or that every butterfly was a dead relative, or that, you know, that angels talk to me and can heal my stomach ache, or, you know, like I've never been one of these people. And so the idea that there's energies in your body that do real things that aren't just some weird psychological thing you're doing to yourself, I was extremely skeptical about this. And it really took my teachers showing me stuff and demonstrating stuff and doing these practices and having stuff happen. And then, as I said a couple of days ago, you know, my wife doesn't believe in any of this stuff. And so I like to use her sometimes to figure out if something is just like a psychological thing or if it's a real thing. So the example I gave the other day is, and this is not a particularly profound capability, which is why I'm sharing it, right? Like this is a pretty beginner level thing that you can do. So you're building up these substances, this chi, vitality in the body, which makes you have more energy because it's part of what makes you alive according to these systems. It is a tangible physical substance, but it's not protons, electrons, and neutrons. We've measured Qigong people. I've looked at that research, and it's not anything physical that we can find. That being said, it is a tactile thing. You can feel it through your tactile body, which is part of the reason I train people in body scanning, because that's preparing you to work with these kinds of things at some point, if you are so inclined. So with my wife, for example, I wanted to see if, you know, I had been storing a bunch of this, what feels like a real physical substance in the lower abdomen, which is part of these practices. And once you store enough of it, you can start to move it around and you can feel it moving around. And so I thought, well, since my wife doesn't think any of this is real and doesn't care about any of it, I'm just going to see if I can eject some of this substance into her body and see if she notices. And so I had my hand on her foot, and I just pulled as much of this, I mean, like every bit of this substance that I can. I sent it through my arm and through my hand. And my wife suddenly goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" Because I hadn't said anything. I hadn't changed anything I was doing. I was just, you know, doing what I was doing. And she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "All of a sudden, I feel this thing running up my body, and it hit the top of my head, and now I feel dizzy." And I went, "Okay." Right? So I kind of had to be dragged kicking and screaming into thinking this was a real thing. I share all of that to say that likewise, these systems say that you have three things that make you up, basically. You have the physical body, you have sort of substances that are like prana, chi, kundalini, that are not physical. Mostly speaking, they're not physical, but they're there and you can touch them and they're tangible and they do stuff. And then you have your mind. So a system like Lohan, and the Taoist systems and the Buddhist tantras, they teach you how to work with the body, and they teach you how to work with these energy things that are running through the body, right? And they have spent hundreds of years hundreds of years trying to figure out how do we make use of the body and these energy systems, these sub-physical substances that run through the system to give you the maximum benefit for your training. And again, I do these practices, but I don't teach them because I know enough to do them. I don't know enough to teach them. But part of the reason I'm partnering with Neil is that he knows enough to teach those aspects. So for those of you who don't have like a qigong or an energy practice, and for those of you who don't have a physical practice, I cannot recommend the Lohan Palm course enough. And hopefully it'll be launching in the next week or two. Okay. Earth Wombat expressing some gratitude. Very, 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 very happy to hear you're making some progress. You know, it's just it breaks my heart because so many people have so much heart, right? Like they're willing to put in an hour or 2 hours a day, and people are giving them techniques that can't produce very much result for that amount of effort. It's heartbreaking. My heart has been breaking for years talking to people, and I don't know why, but all of a sudden people, after years of talking to people about this stuff, all of a sudden people are listening to my opinion. I don't know why. But in any case, there are techniques you can use in the real world to make progress in this stuff. And everyone that I've taught these things to who's actually put them into practice has seen results, and not like over years, but usually over months. And usually by the time they get to 2 years, 3 years into training in these techniques, in addition to whatever they're doing in their own thing, which is fine with me, you can do whatever you're doing in your lineages and whatever other practices you have, carry on with that. I'm not territorial, I want you to succeed in your lineage. When my Eastern Orthodox student came to me and said that because of my techniques, he had the most profound session of prayer he's ever had in his life, I was overjoyed, completely overjoyed. These things make everything you do more powerful. That's just how it is. Okay. Yeah, Wombat, if okay, Dragon, I'll check your DM. Take a look at that. Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's good. Before I have people on, I like to talk to them, make sure the vibe is right, to make sure that the opinions they have are things that I think are adding to, for lack of a better term, the sort of mission that I'm on, which is to help people that are, part of it is inspiration, like having people come on that are lay people who have trained in this stuff for a long time and saying, yeah, I've met other people that have accomplished stuff. I've made some progress myself, and here's what I did to do it. I think hearing that from other lay people living in the real world, it helps, because we're not just reasonable people, right? We're not just a bag of reasons and logic. We have a heart. And when we see another person that's kind of like us, living a life that we can understand, and we go, well, that person did it, we go, well, maybe I can really do it. And this changes how much effort we put in. And, it changes our whole attitude in regards to our practices. So this is part of what I'm doing with the podcast, is just trying to get, one aspect. So yeah, if your professor wanted to come in, and it was a good fit and we had some interesting stuff to talk about, I'd be into it. Just make the connection and we'll start talking. So I'm looking for, I'm looking for your message. I'm not sure that I see it. Okay, so there's a question. This is a. I'll answer your. I'll answer your question, Dragon. I'll answer it in over here because we're still sort of in meditation talk a little bit here in this session. All right, my friends. Yeah, I guess we've kind of reached the end. We've kind of reached the end of this session. So yeah, if there are questions that come up between here and tomorrow, you can put it in the comment section. I do my best to try to answer questions when I get up in the morning. Try to answer people's questions as I'm getting my day started in the YouTube comment section. So feel free to put things there. Oh, also tomorrow, since you guys have stuck it out this far, tomorrow I'm going to have the Advaita Vedanta practitioner on. He got sick and he wasn't able to come on when I thought he was going to be able to, but now he's feeling better, and so we're going to meet up tomorrow. I'm going to put that in the community section and put up the time and everything. So just like the first episode of the podcast, I'll stream it live while filming it, and then I'm going to take it down and I'm going to edit it like I did the previous one, and then put it up as an edited piece. So if you want to be there to ask questions, if you want to watch it in full form, the only way to do it will be to turn up at the time that it's actually going on. Okay? So, for those of you who are interested in seeing a full on conversation between a modern Advaita practitioner who has a PhD and a Buddhist practitioner who's full on and also has a PhD, maybe it'll be interesting. I hope it is. All right, dear ones. All right, dear friends, comrades, colleagues. I wish you the very best. I don't have my skull mug with me, so I'll just say adieu and farewell. See you tomorrow.